Have you ever woken up and realized your entire life has been stolen by your own children? I was in a hospital bed, half paralyzed, recovering from a stroke, thinking I'd survived the worst. But I hadn't. The real betrayal came after. They said they were protecting me, that I was too sick to manage my own business, my home, my future. But while I fought for my life, they dismantled it. Quietly, efficiently, legally. They took everything. My name, my work, my worth. And they expected me to thank them. So tell me, what would you do if your family turned into thieves? The hospital bracelet was still tight around my wrist when they handed me the discharge papers. 3 months. 3 months of surgeries, complications, and staring up at white ceiling tiles while machines beeped around me like artificial lullabies. I'd had a stroke. It took the left side of my body, though the doctors said I was lucky. With time and therapy, they claimed, I'd recover most of my function. Lucky. That's what they called it when your own body turns against you, and you're the one left to pick up the pieces. I shuffled toward the exit, my left leg dragging slightly. Outside, my eldest son Marcus stood by the doors, arms folded like a judge already prepared to deliver a sentence. That look on his face, it wasn't new. I'd seen it when he was 12 and decided he knew better than I did. Rebecca was glued to her phone, avoiding my eyes, her manicured nails tapping at the screen like a clock counting down. David, my youngest, stood behind them both, his expression unreadable, caught between guilt and something colder. "We need to talk," Marcus said, just as the doors slid open and I stepped into the October air. The cold hit me harder than I expected. So did the truth. "Can we at least get to the car first?" I asked, clutching the thin plastic bag of my personal belongings, a change of clothes, my reading glasses, the Bible my mother had given me on my wedding day. That bag held the last pieces of the life I thought I still had. "We're not going to the house," Rebecca said, finally looking up. I stopped walking. The world moved around me, other families helping their loved ones into wheelchairs, guiding them toward hope or home. A man gently lifted his wife into a sedan, his hand never leaving her back. And here I was, barely upright, while my children, my own children, stood ready to tell me I no longer had a home to return to. "What do you mean?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Marcus stepped forward. "The house is gone, Mom. Foreclosure. The business is closed. We had to make some tough decisions." "Tough for who?" I said, trying to steady myself as the words sliced through the chill. "What about the assets, the accounts?" David spoke quietly. "We used the power of attorney while you were unconscious." The plastic bag slipped from my fingers, its contents spilling across the sidewalk. My Bible fluttered open on the pavement, pages catching the wind. "That was for emergencies," I whispered, stooping to gather what I could with my good hand. "Medical decisions, not this." "This was an emergency," Marcus snapped. "You were dying. We acted fast to save what we could." "To save yourselves," I said. And in that moment, I realized I'd survived the stroke, but I was just beginning to feel the pain of a much deeper wound. One not caused by blood clots or blocked arteries, but by betrayal. The kind you never fully recover from. The moment they said, "We saved ourselves," I understood exactly what had happened. They hadn't protected me. They'd executed a hostile takeover of my life, and they did it all with smiles, signatures, and legal jargon dressed up as compassion. Marcus stepped in with the confidence of a man used to making executive decisions. "We dissolved the corporation, distributed the assets, and transferred everything. It was the only way to salvage anything." "Salvage?" I said, trying to keep my balance on the uneven pavement. "I built that company from the ground up. Hartwell and Associates was mine." "Was," Rebecca said with a sigh like I was just being difficult. "Mom, it was already collapsing. The bills, the overhead, it wasn't sustainable." I gripped the handle of the plastic bag tighter. You didn't even wait for me to wake up." "You might not have woken up," David said, finally raising his voice. "We didn't know. We were scared. You were slipping away. We did what we thought was best. For themselves, for their futures, for their bank accounts." Marcus kept going. "We've arranged for long-term care, Sunset Manor. It's clean, professional. You'll qualify for state assistance now that you're... well, now that I'm broke," I thought. Now that they've made sure of that. I didn't say a word as we stood outside Portland General Hospital, the wind cutting through my thin discharge clothes. I just stared at my children, the very people I had worked overtime for, sacrificed holidays for, put through college and cushioned into adulthood. I gave them security. I gave them choices. And now they had used those choices to take mine away. David stepped closer. "You'll be taken care of, Mom. We'll visit. You won't be alone." I looked into his eyes and saw the flash of something human, regret maybe, but it was too little, too late. "I won't go to a facility," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "You can barely walk," Marcus snapped. "You can't live alone. You're 73 and recovering from a stroke. This is reality." No. This was their version of reality, the one where I became a liability to be managed, not a person to be respected. Rebecca sighed. "You're being unreasonable." I turned and started walking, nowhere in particular, just away. My left leg dragged, my arm ached. But I walked. Because in that moment, it was the only power I had left. Behind me, I heard the disbelief in their voices. "Where is she going?" Rebecca asked. "She'll call when she's ready to be reasonable," Marcus muttered. They didn't know. I wasn't coming back, not to the house they'd stolen, or the company they'd gutted, or the roles they'd rewritten without me. I sat at a nearby bus stop, the plastic bag pressed to my chest, and watched them drive away. That BMW sedan? It was new, shiny, likely paid for with the remnants of my life. They thought they'd erased me. But the thing about being underestimated? It gives you room to rise. The bus ride was quiet, the kind that gives you too much time to think. I had $17 in my wallet, a bus pass that would expire at the end of the month, and no plan. The driver glanced at me with a softness I hadn't seen in my children's eyes. "You okay, honey?" she asked. I nodded because what else could I say? I rode until the end of the line, Portland's industrial district, where warehouses bled into chain-link fences and cracked sidewalks. There was a diner still lit up, its flickering neon sign promising hot coffee and anonymity. I walked in and sat down. "Rough day?" the waitress asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just wrapped my fingers around the warm mug and let something inside me collapse. Quietly, thoroughly, not like a building falling down, more like a bridge finally giving in to the weight it had carried for too long. I cried. Not for the stroke, not even for the business. I cried because I was invisible, because my children had rewritten the story of who I was, and no one had questioned it. Later that night, I found a motel. The Riverside. $38 a night, cash only. The room smelled like disinfectant and old cigarettes, but it had a bed and a door that locked. That was enough. The manager didn't ask questions, just slid the key across the counter with a practiced glance. People who stayed here weren't looking for conversation. They were looking for space to disappear. That first week I called the bank. My accounts were frozen. Irregular activity, they said. Translation. My children had moved my money while I was unconscious. The business account was closed. My credit cards cancelled. Even my health insurance had been changed, shifted to Medicare without my consent, which meant most of my recovery therapy was no longer covered. I sat on the motel bed, surrounded by paperwork and rejection letters, realizing the truth. I hadn't just lost my assets. I'd been erased. My company's phone number was gone. The website was offline. My LinkedIn changed to former owner. As far as the world was concerned, Alicia Hartwell was already history. I called Janet Morrison, my longest client, a woman who once said she'd never trust anyone else with her books. "Oh, honey," she said gently. "Marcus told us you were confused, that you shouldn't be handling finances anymore." Confused. I wasn't confused. I was furious. That night I burned everything in the motel parking lot. Certificates, awards, business cards, even old Chamber of Commerce photos. The smoke curled into the sky, carrying 37 years of effort with it. And then I did something else. I cut my hair. No style, no symbolism. Just scissors in a motel bathroom and the desperate need to look like someone else, someone new. Because the woman they erased? She was gone. I took the documents and sat on the floor beside her desk, cross-referencing every line item, every signature. What I found wasn't just error, it was design. Things moved around too cleanly, too deliberately. Some reports had been altered after submission. And the signatures? They didn't match. Someone had been siphoning money and covering their tracks. "Carmen," I said, "I don't think your bookkeeper made mistakes. I think she was stealing from you." Carmen's eyes filled with something worse than shock, confirmation. "Can we prove it?" "Maybe, but not in time to stop the state from shutting us down." That night, the board met to decide the shelter's fate. 7 members, grim and tired, prepared to vote on closure and liquidation. I sat in the corner, technically just an admin assistant, listening to them discuss how to move 37 women and 12 children out by January. Just before the vote, I stood. "Excuse me," I said. "I have an alternative proposal." I laid out the evidence, bank statements, forged signatures, a timeline of manipulation. I had spent the entire afternoon calling my old lawyer, contacting state auditors, even pestering 2 local banks for access to old documentation. What I presented wasn't a theory, it was a case. Dorothy, the board president, listened closely. "It's compelling," she said. "But even if you're right, it doesn't solve our cash flow problem." "It does," I said, and pulled out a cashier's check. $50,000. My last resource, a small life insurance policy Richard had left behind. I'd borrowed against it, no interest, no strings, just 6 months' worth of operational costs. The vote was unanimous. We would stay open. That night, Carmen asked the question she hadn't dared ask before. "Why would you do this? You barely know us." I looked at her and thought of the motel, the bus stop, the way my children had looked right through me. And I said, "Because this place gave me something back. And now it's my turn." In saving the shelter, I realized something vital. You don't have to be powerful to make a difference. You just have to be willing to fight for people who've been told they don't matter. Because I had been one of them. And I knew exactly what that felt like. But someone was going to take her place. And she wouldn't be so easy to steal from. The crisis came on a Tuesday. I'd been at the shelter for 2 months, and the rhythm of the job had become second nature. Mornings meant intake logs, emails, coffee brewing in a chipped pot. But when I walked into Carmen's office that day, she looked like a woman who'd just lost her last fight. Papers were scattered across her desk. Her laptop was open to a bank statement. She didn't look up when she said, "Alicia, we need to talk." The state audit had come through, 3 years' worth of records examined with bureaucratic precision. The numbers didn't add up. Misclassified expenses, donor money spent in the wrong places, grant reports that simply didn't match the reality. "We owe $140,000, she said, plus penalties, and we don't have it." Carmen wasn't someone who broke easily, but that morning she looked ready to shatter. I didn't set out to become an advocate. After the shelter was saved, I planned to fade into the background, quiet, helpful, anonymous. But word spread. Other shelters reached out, asking if I could look over their books. Some of them had never been audited. Some were one bad grant cycle away from collapse. One had lost nearly $20,000 to a volunteer who'd been pocketing donations. So I helped. I reviewed records, rewrote budget structures, and filed grant paperwork. At first it was just local, then regional, then statewide. Carmen called it a ripple effect. I called it doing what needed to be done. By the end of that year, we founded the Coalition for Economic Justice and Vulnerable Adult Protection. A mouthful, yes, but the mission was simple: protect those most easily exploited, especially by the people closest to them. Our first goal? Legislative change. That's how I ended up testifying at the Oregon State Capitol, standing in front of a row of senators, microphone steady, voice sharper than it had been in years. We introduced Senate Bill 847, the Vulnerable Adult Financial Protection Act, a bill that would require independent oversight of large financial transactions when a power of attorney or guardianship is involved, mandatory reporting, clear guidelines, legal accountability for family management of an adult's assets, not to punish families, to protect victims. I looked out at the senators and told them about Patricia Guyan, 79, evicted by her own son while recovering from surgery, or James Martinez, a veteran declared incompetent by his daughter so she could clean out his savings. I didn't mention myself. I didn't need to. But I saw it in their faces, recognition. Everyone knew someone, a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor. These weren't isolated stories. This was a system problem. Every day, I said, 11 vulnerable adults in Oregon are financially exploited, usually by family, and less than 3% of those cases are prosecuted. Senator Robert Hayes, the skeptic on the panel, leaned forward. You're asking us to increase oversight and regulation. Doesn't that slow down decision-making for families trying to help? No, Senator, I said calmly. It protects the people who are already being harmed, while no one's watching. The hearing ended with polite applause and a dozen follow-up questions. As I gathered my papers, I noticed a man sitting in the back row. He wore a suit, too nice for the setting. He didn't look like a staffer. It was David. Our eyes met for a brief second before he looked away, and I knew he'd heard everything. Maybe he came for closure. Maybe he came for forgiveness. But I didn't approach him. Not yet. Because this moment wasn't about him or them. It was about all the people like me who'd been dismissed, ignored, erased. And now, for the first time, someone was listening. It was 4 years after that hospital sidewalk when David walked back into my life. I was in my office, reviewing a draft of new testimony for the upcoming session, when my assistant knocked. Alicia, there's someone here to see you. Says he's your son. David stood in the reception area, turning a baseball cap in his hands like a nervous teenager. He looked older than his 32 years, thinner, tired, haunted, as if the weight of what he was about to say had been crushing him for years. "Hello, Mom," he said. The word felt foreign, a title I hadn't worn in a long time. I led him into my office. He paused at the framed newspaper articles, the photo with Governor Martinez, the legislative proclamations on the wall. His gaze lingered on one headline. Local advocate wins national award for elder rights. He didn't sit until I did. "I need to tell you something," he said. "About what happened, about Marcus, about Rebecca, about me." I didn't interrupt. I'd learned the power of silence. In advocacy work, people often reveal more when you give them space to do it. He took a breath. "They didn't just dissolve the company after your stroke. They stole from it. From you. Months before the stroke, Marcus was already moving money, setting up new accounts, planning it." He looked up, eyes rimmed red. I helped. I didn't flinch. He told me you were slipping, that your decisions were erratic, that you were going to lose everything Dad built. He forged bank statements, invented complaints. He made it sound like we were saving the family. David showed me a screenshot of a bank transfer, one of dozens. $840,000. That's what they took. We split it. I bought a house in Lake Oswego. Rebecca started her business. Marcus got in with that real estate group. And then he said the part that really mattered. I knew 6 months later that it was wrong. I wanted to come back, to tell you, but I didn't know how. And now Marcus, he's under federal indictment. Wire fraud, money laundering, the FBI is involved. I sat very still. He's hoping you'll speak to the prosecutors, that maybe, if you explain it was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I asked, voice flat. David winced. I know how it sounds. I'm not asking for him. I'm asking because I don't know what else to do. He looked so small in that chair. Not like a grown man. Like the boy who used to hold my hand at grocery stores, terrified of getting lost. I'm sorry, he said. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just needed to tell the truth. Needed to tell. I reached into my drawer, pulled out a leather folder, and placed it on the desk. What's that? He asked. Evidence, I said. The documentation of everything you just confessed. David stared at it. Are you going to give it to the FBI? I looked him in the eye. David, I gave it to them 3 years ago. David froze. His hand hovered near the folder like it might burn him. 3 years ago? He echoed. I nodded. The day I realized you'd all moved on like I'd already died, I started collecting everything. Every bank transfer, forged document, communication between you, the dissolution paperwork. I built a timeline. I knew what had happened, even if no one was brave enough to say it out loud. He sank back in the chair, the color draining from his face. You knew? This whole time? I didn't need a confession, I said. I needed facts, evidence. That's the thing about people who steal from the vulnerable. They always leave a paper trail, and I know how to follow it. He looked like he might cry or run or crumble right there on the carpet. What happens now? He asked quietly. That's not up to me, I said. You're not children anymore. You made adult choices, and now the consequences are catching up. He shook his head slowly. You've built something incredible. What we did, it led to all of this. The advocacy, the coalition. Maybe in some twisted way it was meant to happen. That was the moment I leaned forward and my voice went ice cold. No, I said, don't you dare dress up what you did as fate or some blessing in disguise. You didn't give me this path. I carved it myself, out of loss, out of grief, out of betrayal so deep it almost killed me. You don't get credit for my survival. David looked away, ashamed. You're right, I wanted to believe maybe something good came out of it. Something did, I said. But not because of you, in spite of you. The silence stretched between us. I could feel the weight of 4 years pressing against that moment, the absence, the anger, the healing that didn't need their permission. I want to make it right, he said. I don't know how. You can't, I replied. What's done is done. The only thing you can control now is whether you tell the full truth, not to me, to them. David reached for the folder, his hands shaking. I'll testify, I'll cooperate, I'll tell them everything. I didn't stop him, because justice doesn't always come with revenge. Sometimes it comes in the form of a trembling confession, sometimes in the cold determination of someone who refuses to stay silent. When David left my office, he didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But for the first time, he walked out like a man ready to face the consequences of his own actions. Not as my son, But as one of the many who thought they could steal a future from someone too weak to stop them, they were wrong. I wasn't weak, I was just getting started. If this story moved you or made you think twice about how easily trust can be broken, drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know faced something like this? We want to hear your voice. And if you're into powerful stories of survival, justice, and redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button. New videos every week diving deep into real-life twists that'll leave you thinking long after the screen goes dark. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. If this story moved you or made you think twice about how easily trust can be broken, drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you or someone you know faced something like this? We want to hear your voice. And if you're into powerful stories of survival, justice, and redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button. New videos every week diving deep into real-life twists that'll leave you thinking long after the screen goes dark. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world.